Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu tabaraka wa ta'ala alayhi wa sallam wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa tabi'een. Amma ba'd. The topic set today was learning lessons from the life of Hazrat Thanwi, rahmatullah alayhi. So I thought I'd just spend 2 minutes to tell you why we picked this series of selecting some of the elders. You see, when I came to your blessed town of Bolton 4 years ago, I had lots of expectations. यानी आप हजरात नहीं जानते जो बाहर वाले इन शहरों के बारे में सुनते हैं, सोचते हैं. So I had lots of expectations. And Allah Pak ka fazl hai, I met people like Hazrat Qari Ali Sahab, Hazrat Maulana Yaqub Sahab Nanji, Muddadilluhuma alayna. Alhamdulillah, I met enough to make me happy. लेकिन मैंने बहुत सी ऐसी चीज़ें भी देखी which I wasn't necessarily expecting. So the reason why we selected the elders is because ये जो हमारे बड़े गुजर गए हैं, these names that we are not aware of, whether it's Hazrat Maulana Qari Ismail Samniwala rahmatullah alayhi, Hazrat Maulana Shaykh al-Hadith Maulana Ali Sahab Nanji rahmatullah alayhi, and even the people that presides on helping the ulama, Yaqub Bhai Dada Baruchi that passed away rahmatullah alayhi, or these giants like Hazrat Thanwi rahmatullah alayhi. These are all people that we are indebted to. And one thing I've noticed is that the younger generation, you could call them similar to my age, या ये जो Muhammad Sakiria के age की तरह हैं, there's a massive gap between them and the elders. Massive gap. You only have to look around the masjid outside of Ramadan. मैं Masjid Usman की ज़्यादा बात नहीं कर सकता. I'm talking generally from my travels. You see that the majority of the congregation are older. Now, there will be reasons for this. That's not the topic of the bayan. But what I'm trying to say is that we need to try and bridge this gap and understand who these elders were, what their maqsid was, what their purpose was, so that we can inshallah follow in their footsteps because we are truly indebted to them. आपको मैं एक किस्सा सुनाऊं from our Hazrat Rahmatullah Ali Maulana Yusuf Mutala Sahab Nawwarallahu Marqadahu. Hazrat was once teaching sabaq, and we came, well, not we, but the person that mentioned this to me, they came across a narration where one sahabi had asked one question to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in result, the ummah had been blessed with one answer. किसी ने होता है ना कभी क्लास में, somebody asks a question, the same thing's on your mind, and then for the rest of years that go on by, people benefit from that answer. So Hazrat Farmate hai goes, just because of that one question, one time, the ihsan, the favor on the ummah of that one sahabi, I completed one Qur'an Pak for his Isali Sawab. So the point I'm trying to make is that the series that we selected, whether it was Hazrat Thanwi, Hazrat Saharanpuri, Hazrat Maulana Ilyas Sahab, last night Haji Imdadullah rahmatullah alayhim, was so that we understand this concept of who our pious predecessors were, build a connection with them, and through that, inshallah, ultimately to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His beloved Nabi Pak sallallahu tabaraka wa ta'ala alayhi wasallam. So with that short introduction, we now are slowly moving towards the Ramadan of Hazrat Thanwi. Now, again, time is short, so I'm trying to pick and choose from a couple of these examples. Very briefly, for the people that do not understand, perhaps the young ones, who Hazrat Thanwi is. Hazrat Thanwi's full name is Hazrat Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanwi, rahmatullah alayhi. And the reason why we refer to him as Thanwi is because he was from a place, or he did a lot of khidmat, and he was attributed to Thana Bhawan in your beloved Hindustan in India. मैं तो पाकिस्तानी हूँ, I've never been. दुआ फरमाए अल्लाह पाक मौका दे when I get a chance to go to these qubur. Now, Hazrat Thanwi rahmatullah alayhi, the reason why we just say his name, we say the scholar from a certain city, is because he was so blessed, okay, that some people, even though there's hundreds of people or thousands of scholars, we just attribute the city to their name. And you don't even need to mention their name. So I suppose it's equivalent to say, the footballer from Madrid, automatically the name comes into your head as Cristiano Ronaldo. If somebody says the footballer from the city of Barcelona, automatically the name comes into your mind, Lionel Messi. Samajh mein mere aa gayi, just putting on a level. So I don't want to spend too much time going through Hazrat Thanwi, who he was. I just want to mention a couple of points so that we understand who we are discussing before we look at Hazrat Ramadan. There's a book, Karwani Mujaddid Thanwi Rahmatullah Alayhi. It's just been written about the type of things that Hazrat was known for, what he did. And that book is not just one volume, 10 volumes. It's 10 just describing who Hazrat Thanwi was, and it's impossible for me to even do justice to anything that Hazrat Thanwi has done to us today. You've probably heard from this member, and yaqeenan, you've probably heard in the past, that Hazrat Thanwi had many khususiyat. He had many, special qualities. People mention his knowledge, the fact that his scholarship extended to nearly 1,000 books or 1,000 pieces of writing. That's why the likes of Qadi Mujahidul Islam Qasmi Rahmatullah would say that it's hard to think of any area of Islamic science that Hazrat Thanwi did not lift his pen on. But the reason why today's point is Hazrat Thanwi's knowledge to one side, let's go one step further. Hazrat Thanwi's khususiyat, as mentioned by Maulana Abdul Bari Nadwi, was that not only was he a mountain of knowledge, not only was he able to put that knowledge into practice, lekin unka shariyat ka amal ka andaz, the way he presented the shariat, the way he practiced the shariat within its boundaries, with logic, with hikmah, that very few people can come close to where the Hazrat was able to express and teach Islam. That is why he has titles such as Hakimul Ummah, the spiritual wise physician, Mujaddid-e Millat, the reformer or the reviver. And before I go into Ramadan, one small example, bahut khoobsurat, tawajjuh se suniye, one very small example of exactly illustrating why Hazrat Thanwi was Hazrat Thanwi. So Hazrat Thanwi, he, as I mentioned, was from Thana Bhavan. Once he was on his travel to Hyderabad. Kisi dini kaam ke liye gaye the. He was away for some religious region. When he reached Hyderabad, the person that was you could say the wazir of the area, in charge from the government, ya jo bhi tha, he sent a request to Hazrat Thanwi that I want to meet you. So when he wrote his letter, the first letter he mentioned to Hazrat Thanwi, he said, look, I'm an official from so-and-so. I've heard lots about you. Unfortunately, I was so busy that I couldn't come to Thana Bhavan, but now I know that you're in my city. These are the times of my office. These are my times of my office, and if we can work something around. So he put his timetable forward first. So Hazrat Thanwi though, as I mentioned yesterday in Aapke Ham Makki Masjid, कि Hazrat Thanwi's andaz was ajeeb, that he says that when I ever correct somebody, hota hai, everybody needs corrected. I remember at that time this person is 100,000 times better than me. So Hazrat Thanwi, when he wrote a reply to this minister, he says, I am happy that you have azmat for ulama. I am happy that this is a good quality. But when I read your second line, the way you put forward your timetable, I was just as unhappy as I was happy in the first line. Why? Because, we do this quite a lot. We almost subconsciously feel that our time or we are more important than the other person. Or, मैं सिर्फ ulama तक महदूद नहीं करता, we're just students. Ulama are the people, like we mentioned, Hazrat Maulana Qari Yaqub Sahab, Hazrat Maulana Ali Sahab Rahmatullah Qari Sahab, these are ulama, not idiots like me. I'm just mentioning this point, that we have this general problem within us, that whether we're speaking to ulama or other people, we feel as though that our time is being wasted. How many times you walk in a queue and say, oof, you've wasted 2 hours of my time, and this is something that I need to learn from. Khair, back to the story. So this minister, वो मेरी और आपकी तरह नहीं था, okay? he was one person who actually understood, you know what, mere se ghalti ho gaya, I made a mistake. I should have put myself forward in a better way. So he wrote a second letter to Hazrat Thanwi. He goes, Hazrat, you tell me your times, and inshallah I'll be there. Problem solved? Hazrat Thanwi wrote back, he goes, Abhi aap tak baat nahi samjhe. He goes, even now, you've not understood what you're making a mistake. Hazrat goes, look, you should have known that I am on safar. When you go on safar and you're somebody's guest, okay? Hamara hota na, we phone that person to say, oh, we don't even care about the person who's invited him to override his timetable, what he's cooked for this guest, what he's planned for this guest. We just want, hamara maqsad pura ho jaye. Mauli sahab idhar aavo, no bayan karo, no. You know, no concept of who we're affecting, who we're hurting. So Hazrat Thanwi goes, he goes, you know in safar, you're not in control of your own time. Okay? Therefore, even such a request is not appropriate. So the letter comes back third time. The minister realizes his first mistake, second mistake. Mukhlis aadmi tha. He goes, Hazrat, you know what? Forget your timing. Forget my timing. I'm just going to come for your ziyarat. And if you don't look at me or you don't speak to me, alhamdulillah, I will be happy, I'll go back. And if you have time, if it's appropriate with you, then inshallah, I'll be more than welcome to meet you. So Hazrat Thanwi now replies for a third time, he goes, Ab tu samajh gaya. Now you've understood. Listen to this. Listen to this. Hazrat Thanwi goes, he goes, the beginning of this conversation, you wanted to meet me. Now, I feel like I want to meet you. Allahu Akbar. I now want to meet you. You tell me what time you're free and I'll make sure I'll come and meet you. So in one conversation, how Hazrat has gone through the first half, when somebody asked him, he goes, look, for the first two letters, I was trying to prevent this problem that we have in this society, what is known as tadhallul, disgracement of ulama and ulama's time. That was my intention. That is why I had to correct that individual. But when I realized that he acknowledged his mistake and he was sincere, at that point I had to save myself from takabbur and pride, which is why I said, I'm coming to meet you. Allahu Akbar. So sochne ki baat hai, in one conversation, how the likes of Hazrat Thanwi were able to analyze, that level of insight, foresight, hindsight, introspection. This is something that we lack today. And inshallah, if I get time to continue, which I might not do, you will see this theme being reflected in the way Hazrat Thanwi rahmatullah alayhi would spend his Ramadan, would organize his Ramadan, and would endorse his Ramadan. So let's now move on to mention a couple of anecdotes before we run out of time. Hazrat jab Quran padhte the, when Hazrat Thanwi rahmatullah alayhi, the kitabs mentioned, it was almost as if he was reciting from an open Quran. Is tarah hum padhte hain na opening Quran. Unfortunately, people like me, when we open the Quran, we're still because we never spend the time to improve our recitation. But normally speaking, people that recite the Quran openly, they recite it quite fluently. And Hazrat's Quran became so famous that, forget as a big Buzurg Maulana, in his student days in Kanpur, the masjid would become so busy that people would leave straight after iftar just so they could make to see Hazrat Thanwi's qiraat. Yes? In those days, perhaps there was no speakerphone, etc. These technological advances, ye mere god mein is XPS 13, just probably just made us lazy, lekin kya kare? We have to get on with things. So people would come and just to listen to Hazrat's Quran, and this sifat, this is present in a lot of Akabir. I mentioned in Masjid Salam not long ago, that Sayyid Ataullah Shah Bukhari rahmatullah alayhi, forget the Muslims, the people that like Quran, the non-Muslims would travel just to listen to his Quran. Allahu Akbar. So there's an interesting story when there were so many people, because when you don't have a microphone system, when Hazrat Thanwi rahmatullah alayhi would say Allahu Akbar to go into your sajda tilawat, Imam Sahib karta hai na sajda tilawat. Nowadays because it's Allahu Akbar all the way down to the bottom. But in those days, Hazrat Thanwi There was no microphone system. So when Hazrat said Allahu Akbar, some of them would go into sajda that were at the front. The rest of them, they would go into ruku. Okay? But again, look at Hazrat's faqahat. Logo ko taklif na ho. They don't get upset that their namaz is not thing. As you know, in the Hanafi madhab, there is an opinion. The Mufti and Akram will tell you that the Imam Sahib can actually do intention of doing sajda tilawat in his ruku. So Hazrat Thanwi flipped the fatwa, and just so that everybody else's namaz will be saved, this was the level of insight again. Moving on. Hazrat's iftari. You know, Hazrat Rahmatullah alayhi would say, I eat less in iftari so that I can eat extra in sahri. The complete opposite of what we do. Pet bhar lete hain iftari time, and what we're doing at sahri time? As if we're lucky to get awake. Chalo, we'll leave the jokes aside. Because you know, Hazrat Thanwi Rahmatullah alayhi, he understood this concept. Hazrat Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, a Sahabi that lived for approximately 83 years, the son of Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He says that since the day I accepted Islam, ma shabi'tu mundu aslamtu, I've never ate to my fill. And he had a long life, as I mentioned, to the age of 83 years old. Why? Because the Salaf, whether it's Hazrat Thanwi, Hazrat Umar, they recognize this rule that kathratu ta'am, that eating excessively, yumitul qalb, kills the heart. Kills the heart. You feel too much like yawning and sleeping than doing any ibadat. Then Hazrat Rahmatullah alayhi, very interesting again is faqahat, bahut aram se iftari karte the, you know. None of this rush bush business. Okay, I understand today's COVID, maybe there's some rules that are slightly different. But even the Mufti and Akram, between the azan of Maghrib and the namaz of Maghrib, they've given some gunjaish that if you delayed it by 5 minutes, no problem. If it means that 200-300 people can have their Taraweeh, their iftars properly in the home, because a lot of masajid, because of COVID, they cannot provide these facilities, and they can come to the masjid and get their takbir-e-ula, we can do this, no problem. Now, this is not an indication. I don't even know what happens in Masjid Usman. This was how Hazrat Thanwi would organize his Ramadan. Again, trying to facilitate proper actions, trying to facilitate people getting a takbir-e-ula. Bache khush ho jayenge, thinking, yeah, 5 more minutes, I could probably eat 3 more burgers in that time. But khair, the Salaf, their maqsad was to do more ibadat, not to fill their bellies. You know, an interesting, again, I'm missing out so much here that shows you Hazrat's mizaj. You know, honestly, kya kahun, Hazrat Maulana Zakaria Kandalwi's father, Hazrat Maulana Yahya Kandalwi, Hazrat Sheikh writes that we went to see Hazrat Thanwi in Ramadan, and aapke yahan wo timetable ka jhagda chalta hai na, everybody's talking about, oh, the prayer times, the moon sighting, you know. To udhar bhi thoda chalta tha. Hazrat Maulana Yahya Kandalwi, he would open roza quickly. There's reasons for that. And Hazrat Thanwi, for his own reasons, would have a bit more ihtiyat. He would open his roza 2-3 minutes afterwards. So Hazrat Maulana Yahya Sahib, he asked Hazrat said, this is what I do. Hazrat Maulana Yahya Sahib said, this is what I do. So Hazrat Maulana Yahya Sahib said, no problem. We'll open our iftari, you can catch up. So Jesse, the time came, Hazrat Maulana Yahya Sahib looked at his watch, looked outside, and opened his roza, and all Hazrat's khuddam started opening his roza. Why? Because Hazrat Thanwi said, I need that 2-3 minutes for peace of mind, so that my roza is done. So when they were eating, Hazrat Thanwi hadn't opened his roza. He goes, me waiting for my peace of mind, by the time I've got peace of mind, you guys will finish the food. You know, between these big buzurgs, there was that level of muhabbat, okay? You know, having different Eids, you know, having different prayer timetables, having different things. These were not issues that caused big major problems. How far we have gone for them today. Moving on. Hazrat Rahmatullah alayhi, after iftar, he would perform his awwabin, his 6 rakats awwabin. Their awwabin was long, but even if, and I mentioned this in one of the other masajid, minimum 12 years of reward Minimum for 6, minimum 12. And if you take the 10 multiplier that we get as a bare minimum, 120 years of reward in the month of Ramadan just for reading those 6 extra rak'at after your Maghrib Salah. And if you're weak like me and you can't necessarily read 2 sunnat, 2 nafil and then another 6, to include your sunnat as well. Start somewhere. Start somewhere, okay? Massive rewards. So Hazrat, he goes on to mention that, once somebody seen him praying awabin sitting on the floor, because we should try and read our nafils, everything as much as we can standing up. So they said, Hazrat, why are you reading sitting down? He said, I'm trying to save myself from becoming arrogant. Allahu Akbar. So he only sat down, so you think people would think less of him, and that would help his arrogance. And Hazrat Thanwi, he was a master at this. He mentions that 2 to 2.5 hours was how much he would sleep on Ramadan. From about midnight till 2:30, that was all he slept. And he mentions in this himself that, if I wanted to, I don't really get any sleep anyway, but it'd be easy for me to stay awake the whole night. But why do I force myself to try and sleep even though I can't sleep? To stop me boasting about myself. To stop my nafs boasting about myself. Allahu Akbar. So Hazrat would force himself to sleep just so he would never be put in this position where he'd have something nice to talk about himself. This concept, okay? Bishr ibn al-Harith rahmatullah alayhi mentions ki la ta'mal litudhkar. Do not mention your good pious actions so that people may talk about them. So you've got something to post on your Instagram, tell people about, on your WhatsApp status. Uktumil hasanata kama taktumus sayyi'ah. Hide your good actions as you hide your sins. So the Salaf would hide their good actions just as much as they would hide, you and me would hide their bad actions, because they wanted it just between them and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Dawood ibn Hind, again another from the Bazurg. Sama arba'ina sana. He kept fast for 40 years. 40 years this individual fasted. La ya'lamu bihi ahluhu kana khazzaran yahmilu ma'ahu ghada'uhu fayatasaddaq bihi fit tariq. 40 years he kept fast. Nobody knew, because what would he do? He'd take his packed lunch from home, so they would think that he's not fasting, and in the way he'd give it to some poor person and keep his roza. Allahu Akbar. Dawood ibn Hind, Rabi ibn Khutaym. He mentioned here ke ma tatawwa ar-Rabi fil masjid al-hayy illa marratan wahida. Through this life of this Buzurg that read thousands of nafals, only once did you catch him reading extra nafal in the masjid. Such was that level of introspect, okay? Thoda main bayan bhi kar do. If you brothers don't mind, I'm going pretty fast and we're finishing shortly. I understand those people that don't have places in their homes to read Taraweeh. Maybe there's too much noise, maybe there's, for whatever reason they have their problems, so they stay in the masjid to read the nawafil. I'm not saying, that there's anything wrong with that. What I don't understand is that when we know that to some degree, and if it means that you're going to go home and forget about reading your nafal and your nawafil, then I understand that as well. You read in the masjid, because many of us were lazy. But there needs to be some element of taking the deen in the masjid to the home. And this is something that COVID has given us a fantastic opportunity to practice upon. No, what I don't understand is, look, nobody really likes wearing masks. We wear masks because of the law. The ulama Akram, they've given permission to wear masks, but normally it's not advised, it's not normally allowed to cover your face while you're reading salah. So COVID is an opportunity where you can go home, you can pray with your family. Just the fact that your children can see you praying your nafal namaz, and you can pray breathing normally, it's a fantastic opportunity that maybe some of us should be taking more of, a chance with. And again, please don't take my words out of context. Because if I said this in Tayyiba Masjid, there'd be a hoo-ha, oh, you stopped our nafal in the masjid. I think you guys have understood exactly what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. It's only so that you, Hazrat, can benefit your people in the home and also be a means of hiding your good actions. Mujhe to dekho, you see me running away. Main to ghar bhi nahi kabhi pad leta, I'm just trying to get out. I'm talking about you pious people. So, I've got lots to get on with. There's 10 minutes left for Taraweeh, and there's actually so much that I wanted to go through. But I'm trying to mention something from Hazrat Thanwi's life. Hazrat Thanwi rahmatullah alayhi has tahajjud. Hazrat started his tahajjud, when he was 12 years old and never left it. How many 12-year-olds here do we have forget praying tahajjud, praying their namaz, even keeping rosé? Sochne ki baat hai na. When I came, one of the reasons why I moved to England, my Darloom Bari mein hum hote the for our i'tikaf. This year is a bit different. I can't forget that day कि मैं upstairs in the Jamaat Khana, जो Darloom Bari gaye honge, they will understand what I'm saying. And I kid you not, there's this 10-year-old crying in front of Allah. Is a 10-year-old child crying in front of Allah Pak, forgive me. तो मैं सोच रहा अपने दिल में कि what the heck has a 10-year-old ever done in his life to be crying like that in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The worst he's probably done is taken a little sweet from the corner shop, तो मैंने सोचा कि यार हमारे मुंह तो काले हो चुके हैं, 35, 36, 40 years old, and we've never ever had the opportunity to in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask forgiveness with that level of ikhlas. When Hazrat Thanwi rahmatullah alayhi would read tahajjud, the books write that it was almost like a ray of light came upwards, And once when Hazrat was in Thana Bhawan, he'd have lots and lots of people, and he didn't like people around him. He didn't like big crowds. But he would say that all my friends, they're busy teaching, and the only free time they get is Ramadan. They want to come for i'tikaf, so I accommodate them. Once a famous Qari from Deoband, he finished his Taraweeh early, he was there. So everybody approached Hazrat, Hazrat, we want to listen to this person's Quran, and our mashwara is that we let this person read 3 paras a day in Taraweeh, and we finish the Quran in the last 10 days. Josh mein aage. But again, this is where Hazrat Thanwi was Hazrat Thanwi. He says, this is good what you have, but what about all those people that will get taklif from you reading so much spari in the last 10 days? So just to take care of those people, they arranged a separate reading after Taraweeh and a separate masjid with no loudspeakers so that nobody would be affected or upset, just to finish and read behind this Qari. And I'll maybe finish on this point. Ayub as-Sikhtiyani rahmatullah alayhi once said that the purpose of our ibadat, the purpose of something you were good. Chahe we're the masjid committee member, it's the guest alim, whether we're in the house, whether we're at the workplace, Hazrat Ayub as-Sikhtiyani mentioned something very, very nice, that your zohd, this quality of staying away from the dunya, trying to be religious, trying to be a bazurg, it should not be adaban ala nas. It should not be a means of causing discomfort to other people. And I wanted to elaborate on this point, but there is only 5 minutes remaining. Whatever we have said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it, If Allah Pak wills, we'll have another opportunity. And please make dua for me. Forgive me for anything negative I've said. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us, reunite us inshallah in Jannat. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Nashhadu la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu alayk.